Penn State fans, Bob Flounders, Max, Ralph, we're coming to you. We're coming to you Thursday morning before we board our flights to California. Huge game, Penn State USC. There's a lot we could say about that, but we're going to start with Max's practice observations from Wednesday night. Definitely newsworthy, I thought, with some of the things you wrote about. Penn State's had some injury issues of late. One injury involving, we don't know what it is, Nick Singleton, and actually a sneaky, potentially problematic injury involving their starting right tackle, Anthony Donkoh, who did not finish the UCLA game. Penn State's going to need all their pieces on the offense. USC is a desperate team, Max. They could be. They're not that far removed from 5-0. They really aren't. Two tough losses on the road where they couldn't hold leads. But before we get into the analysis, Max, how you doing? And just go into what you learned watching practice on Wednesday night up in State College.
Yeah, it's well documented, Bob. I'm not a morning person, so I'm getting rolling. This is rare territory for me, but we're feeling good. We're gonna be out in LA later today. But practice, yeah, it was informative last night.
Yeah.
And, James told us that he anticipates having Anthony Donkoh back out on the field this weekend, which is a really big thing. I mentioned it in my short video last night, if you guys watched that. But I thought Nolan Rucci did some good things here and there on Saturday. I know there is still a fall off, though, when you go from Donkoh to Rucci. So having him back is certainly an important thing. He's just been really good ever since he took over in the Peach Bowl. And he's a talented young kid. The other one, Singleton was back out there practicing, which is huge, but we kind of anticipated that because Franklin said on Monday that they were confident he was going to play this weekend. And the last one, injury-wise, that I noticed was Caden Saunders was not out there again. So you can look to Zion Tracy to be the punt returner again this weekend. He took 3 of 4 last week. Jake Spencer took another one.
Yeah.
And, it sounds like Tracy is the guy that they've wanted to be back there for a long time, based on the way James has been talking about it. Tracy returned a few last week, didn't ever really hit the seam, but Franklin did say they think he has big play potential, and there's going to be punt returns out there this week for Penn State because USC's punter is, I believe, second in the nation with average distance. He's just over 50 yards, but he's outkicked his coverage at times. So there will be an opportunity there, and Penn State is one of the worst teams in the country right now in terms of punt returns.
Yeah.
So they could really use a spark from Tracy this weekend, because especially also Penn State's starting field position has struggled this year. It's not been great.
Yeah. Again, I'm Bob Flounders. He's Max Ralph. It's the Blue White Breakdown podcast. We have we had a lot to get to this week on the podcast. Johnny and I were on early in the week to talk about James Franklin's news conference. Max and Johnny did one that kind of looped in PennLive Penn State Tech subscribers, a mailbag kind of addressing their comments and concerns. I think the plan hopefully is to continue to do that. So Max, I don't know why, if you're a Penn State fan and you're not already a PennLive Penn State Tech subscriber, this is the time to hop on board. We interact with you guys on a daily basis. Again, Max and Johnny did one. They did one on their questions and comments. I did see there were some questions about whether or not Penn State's going to get into the Big Ten title game. I think that is still to be determined. They're trending in the right direction, Max. I think we will have a better answer to that question after Saturday, because USC, even though they have 2 losses, is a formidable foe, especially at home. Penn State's going on the road, Max, for the first time, I think, since it was the last Saturday in August. It was your baptism at PennLive. I know you'll never forget it because of the lightning delay. Neither will I. But
it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. There were some anxious moments as to whether they were actually going to restart the game. I looked at the weather. It's going to be warm, Max, in California. No shocker, but it's been warm all year out in California. That's a little bit of an underrated, I think, storyline to this game that people maybe are not thinking about, especially on the East Coast where it's we're waking up in 50-degree weather and it's getting into the late 60s. But I just looked again, Max, before we got on this podcast. It's going to be in the low to mid 80s. I'm not sure about the humidity. Penn State really hasn't kind of played in that weather for a while. I think USC is comfortable in that weather. We'll just see how the game plays out on the weather front. But getting back, Max, to your practice observations, Johnny and I talked about it a little bit. I don't know how you feel, and I want to get your take. It just felt like to me the way that James – I thought it was kind of awkward the way James talked about Singleton's status, quite honestly, because you leave a lot of room for interpretation when you say, thought I was going to have him last Thursday, thought I was going to have him last Friday, right before the game, didn't have him. To me, without digging into what might have been bothering him, I just think that it was a really preventive issue there against UCLA. If it was the Big Ten championship game, Max, he's probably going to play in that game. I think they wisely held him out. They probably could have handled it a little better, but I definitely expect him to be close to 100%, if not 101% against UCLA. I think that the Donkoh return is also a big story.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I don't really. It was rare, I feel like, for James to be as open about his take on the Singleton injury as he was, because he just doesn't really do that very often. He says, we think we hope he's going to play this weekend, or we weren't sure, but he was like, no, he was like, he should have played, in my opinion, basically, is what he said.
I know.
And so it was a little weird. Awkward is a good way to put it, I think. But he was back out there on the practice field. If he's out there, you can pretty much bank on him playing. So I don't know. It definitely was weird. I'm glad you brought it up, because I hadn't necessarily put it through that lens, but it just doesn't really make sense. But I do want to follow up on the travel part you mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Bob, I don't know if you feel the same way, but James, players, whatever, they're all rightfully so going to downplay what this trip is in terms of the actual travel portion. But I don't think it's a non-zero factor in this game.
Correct.
I mean, you've been home for 5 weeks. You don't have that much time to have your body adjust. I don't know how you could say it's a non-factor, but I understand why they're going to say it, and they should, because you don't want to portray that there are any excuses or anything. But it's just it's a thing. I think it really is. The teams who have done this trip so far, or a similar trip, are 1-8 in Big Ten play. Somebody asked James about it last night, and he was like, "I was really hoping nobody would bring that up, because it really does not matter. That is not a factor in the game." And like, yeah, fine, say that, but I don't agree. Like, I think that I think that it's going to be a thing.
Yeah, sorry about that, Max. You cut out just for a little bit, but we're back good. I agree with you. Speaking of agreeing,
okay,
I agree
about
with
that.
you.
Yeah, I was spotty here this morning on the Wi-Fi.
It's all right. We'll fix it up. We'll fix it up. We'll have those guys clean it up. I agree with you. It is an issue. James, whether he's trying to downplay it, he made it an issue Monday because of the travel plan. In a perfect world, James would like a considerably longer runway at the State College Airport. Penn State is, by the time some of you guys listen to this or watch this, on Thursday, even though we're taping this Thursday morning, Penn State is flying out Thursday. To fly out Thursday, they had to bus to Harrisburg, which is where I am talking to you from now. From where it's about a 2-hour trip for the whole program. James talked about Monday, joining the Big Ten, traveling cross country, bigger planes, more fuel, all that stuff. The State College Airport isn't long enough to kind of accommodate bigger planes who need. I guess I'm no engineer, Max. They need a longer runway to get the bird off the ground is what I think he was saying. Yep. And it's something that needs to be addressed. I don't know how they're going to address that, Max, in State College and widen the airport. I don't think that would be anything cheap to do, but he's not happy about it. My solution, James Franklin, and I know you're going to listen to this podcast and watch this podcast, is you see NFL teams do it all the time. Spend the majority of the week with me in Harrisburg. You guys can just kind of set up shop. I got a lot of hotel recommends. You can have some workouts on one of the practice fields that's not too far by, whether it's a college field, maybe even a high school field. And, that way you'll already be down here, like 48 to 72 hours before you're supposed to fly out of here. You can hang out with me. And then it won't be such a, compacted, rushed, frenzied trip. I know James wants a bigger runway and a bigger airport. I think solution 1B is just to spend more time with me in Harrisburg when you're going to fly out. I promise I won't spy on practice probably, but that's another workaround that's a lot cheaper, Max.
And you and James would have a sleepover in this scenario.
Hey, I don't want to, I'll do what I can. I'll do what I can to accommodate Penn State. Keep it fair, keep it objective. But yeah, I just think that was I just think it's funny that on Wednesday night at practice he's trying to downplay the trip, but Monday he had that question. He had the answer to that question ready to go in case he was asked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why his demeanor in answering it changed. I think it's probably because of the way the question was presented. Because he's never gonna give a potential excuse for losing. If that were to happen, but yeah, it's a factor. It absolutely is. They have a long trip. They have to go through Harrisburg. It is what it is. But I think it's a big game. I think that's kind of where you were probably going to go next, Bob, and where my brain is shifting. Like, yeah, USC's 3-2 this year, but they're better than that. Bottom line, I mean, they had a chance to top Michigan in the Big House. They were another one of those teams who went 2+ time zones over to Minnesota and lost. They really just got out physical there, and I think a big part of that game was how good Minnesota's running backs were, which obviously is a huge thing for Penn State. But this is a huge game. I could sense it when I was out at practice last night. There was some urgency for sure. I mean, the staff knows it. They're trying to relay it to the players, the analysts, the position coaches, everybody. We could overhear a lot of things. That there was no music playing last night. There wasn't a lot of exterior noise around Huluba Hall. We could hear everything. Bottom line, like they are treating this like it is the top 10 matchup we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and I still think in a lot of ways, because of what you said about USC, it really is. I think first year in the Big Ten, it's going to be adjustment for the Pac-12 schools, and it's going to be an adjustment eventually for the Big Ten schools when they come out west. So I watched a lot of the second half of the Minnesota game that USC played. I watched a lot of the highlights of the Michigan game. Mm-hmm. It's very clear watching that USC in particular is just not ready for a legitimate Big Ten running game. And I say that because, in the Pac-12, they really don't have to deal with like that relentless, physical, committed approach. It's just not that. It's not their way of life out there. I mean,
right.
the flip side, and I think they will get better as they now they know what they're up against. They're up against, just offensive linemen, determined offensive staffs that are going to stick with it, right? Minnesota never gave up on it, even when they fell behind. Michigan obviously cannot give up on it because they can't throw the ball. But you got big running backs, you got big offensive linemen, and they're going to have to adjust. But the flip side of that coin is there's a lot of teams and a lot of defenses in the Big Ten that have been here for a while that are going to have a hard time slowing this passing attack, this USC passing attack. Michigan had issues with it. Their workaround was to try and beat the hell out of the quarterback, right? And they did. Like, if you look at the quarterback hurries and the sacks in that game, it was one of the more heroic efforts I've ever seen by a Big Ten quarterback to finish it. But they're not used to it. Minnesota wasn't used to it, but they found a way to make a play and get a strip sack of that guy when it looked like USC was going to win. And I think it's going to also show up for Penn State because they do have NFL athletes in the secondary, but they don't see this. They don't see this kind of passing attack during the season. And they very rarely do from year to year. I mean, West Virginia did not scare Penn State as a passing team. And you saw, Max, we all saw what happened when a Bowling Green team came in there with a well-scripted, well-devised passing attack and a coach that knows how to scheme up offense in the passing game like Scott Loeffler. It took Penn State a long time to get used to that. So when you combine the trip with the weather, with what's coming from the USC passing game, this absolutely feels to me like, even if it's not a top 10 game in terms of rankings, this is a top 10 test for Penn State.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. There's two sides to every coin with this. USC is going to get beat on the ground defensively. Probably going to give up a lot of pressure this weekend because that's exactly what Tom Allen wants to do. I mean, he's gonna throw the house at him, man, this week. Miller Moss isn't going to move around a whole lot. He's going to try and sit in that pocket and throw it. But with that, Penn State can really get an advantage. And I know we'll get to specific predictions later, but in my prediction, I said I think Penn State's going to start slow again this week, but the way that they will be able to be physically dominant against this team is going to open up a strong second half against USC. So I think this could play out similarly to the script of that Bowling Green game, just because of the way that Penn State and USC's teams are set up to play right now. Those USC wide receivers are the best Penn State has faced yet. Bowling Green had some talented kids. Illinois had some talented kids. But AJ Harris said it last night. He said, we're not disrespecting anybody. We got beat a few times against Bowling Green. We got beat against Illinois a few times, but this is the best group we've played so far, and we've got some pressure on us. So it is going to be interesting. Miller Moss is good. I mean, he can throw the ball out there. Like I said, not going to move a whole lot, so you can get pressure on him, as you alluded to, Bob. This will be a test, 100%. And I don't think it's set it and forget it as a W in the Penn State record.
Yeah, so let's get into it, Max. We're about 19 minutes in to this Blue White Breakdown podcast. Just kind of our thoughts about the key matchups, a couple of picks. But yeah, as we talk about this, though, I think the line, Penn State opened around 3.5, 4 at the start of the week on almost every betting site. There's a little bit of a fluctuation, but it's creeping towards 4.5, 5. And that's always interesting because that's, once you get past 3 in a betting line, I don't know if you knew this, Max, but that half point, and as you get closer to a touchdown, because of it's a big deal. So I don't think there's been a lot of USC money bet yet, but the week is still early. It's Thursday morning. The game's not for another 48 hours. So I'm still trying to figure out West Coast time in terms of like when I talk about stuff, because it'll be a 3:30 kick, Max, for Penn State fans on the East Coast, but it's a 12:30 kick out there. UCLA had to deal with it and they hung in there really tough against Penn State, I thought, considering all the things they were up against. Max, one or two matchups or one or two players you think you're going to be following and could go a long way towards shaping this outcome?
Well, I think it really starts on the ground, of course. We mentioned how good Minnesota was on the ground last week, how getting Nick Singleton back affects this game. The other key to look at is on the other side of the ball. USC might be without two of their best run defenders this year. They've already lost D-tackle Bear Alexander for the year due to transfer portal entry redshirt plan. You know, I'm sure if the USC fans are watching this, they'll have thoughts as to whether having Alexander on the field is actually helpful or not. I think there's some debate there. But he's a talented kid and certainly would help stop the run if he was there. And then linebacker Eric Gentry. He's got an injury that might keep him out for a real long time, as far as I've read online from USC coverage. And he was through 4 games their leading tackler. That is a huge loss, and you saw exactly what Minnesota did last week. They went right at the teeth of that defense because they didn't have Gentry, and they succeeded. So, I mean, we already watched Penn State do it against Illinois once. That's exactly where Andy Kotelnicki is going to try and go. They're going to try and run right behind Vanga Ioane, Nick Dawkins, and Sal Wormley. And then, I mean, we already talked about it. My second key is obviously those Penn State cornerbacks. The Lions are going to play a lot of man coverage. They always do. I think they're going to mix in a little more zone than they usually have in the past, just to give Moss some conflicting looks, because he's capable of handling it if you throw one thing at him all game. But they're going to play a lot of man coverage, and those are good receivers over there. So those are my 2 keys.
Yeah, Gentry was a monster in that Michigan game for USC. I think he started his career at Arizona State. He's freakishly long. They list him as a linebacker, but he's just kind of like a chess piece they move around. I think he's like 6'6", 215. Mm-hmm. I'm with you. It looks like he might not only not play in this one. They might redshirt him just because of whatever he's dealing with. Mm-hmm. I think it's upper body, neck, shoulder area. But again, we're not doctors. We only play them, Max, in the press box and when we write. But he is a big loss for them. I think they probably had to move on from him. They play pretty soundly, though, on defense. D'Anton Lynn, former Penn State corner, I had a chance to cover him. He played, late 2008, 9, 10, 11. Good, very good player. Son of Anthony Lynn, an NFL head coach. He's the DC. I think he knows what he's doing. He's working with what he has. I don't know that he has a lot. He did a really nice job at UCLA last year. James has mentioned him. He's got a tall test, though, trying to slow this very well-coordinated running game. Gentry is a big deal. I just want to say that, James Franklin talks about it a lot, and rightfully so. It's been very, very hard to run on this Penn State defense this year and last year. Very, very few are good at it. Michigan was good at it last year at Beaver Stadium, but they were good at it against just about everyone in the country. Penn State has done a very nice job of keeping running games in check. And they did face a good one at West Virginia. Those guys couldn't run on Penn State. I do think Woody Marks is going to be their biggest challenge to date of the season. He's a very talented back. I think he played at Mississippi State before he came to USC. Can also be a weapon in the passing game. He's a guy I'm definitely watching. I think he's really, really good. And I also think what makes him better is the way Lincoln Riley designs his running game. He schemes him up to get him maybe into space a little bit. And then if he can make somebody miss, then, he can get 4, 5, 6 yards. I would say this. Penn State's linebackers, their frontline linebackers, Tony Rojas and Kobe King, I think have been the real deal. I think where Penn State gets in trouble, Max, is when they're not in the game, because they do rotate. That, to me, is a little bit of a concern as this game goes on, especially in warm weather. I don't know about you, Max, but they are still looking to develop depth at linebacker. They like some of their young linebackers. Some of their older linebackers, you know exactly what you're going to get. There are times when King and Rojas aren't on the field that if you're a Penn State fan, you're holding your breath. And I think that's one of the things in the game I'm going to watch is what happens when the backups are in at linebacker. I think that's a concern. And in a close game, right? In a close game, it's a bigger concern. There were moments against UCLA where I was like, whoa, I have not been thrilled with the tackling at points from the linebackers, especially the backups. I think that's an underrated key to this game, even though Penn State's rush defense, Max, I think is number 4 in FBS. I think it's a little bit different in a tight game, especially if Kobe and Rojas are not on the field.
Yeah, that linebacker spot has been one where they've been trying to find some extra depth for a long time. I mean, if you look at what we thought they were going to have in that room in the preseason, It is drastically different right now. Keon Wiley out with that significant injury. Who knows if/when he'll be back. Kavion Keys dismissed from the team. There's 2 pieces who they expected could contribute in some way this year that aren't there anymore. They add Dakari Nelson into the room. And actually, I do think Dakari's done some nice things. Mm-hmm. James and the teammates have been complimentary of him. I think he'll be on the field a lot this weekend in that rotation with Dom DeLuca. But then up the middle, it's not deep. That's just the bottom line. That they're hoping Tamir Robinson can give them quality snaps this weekend. We saw Anthony Specca a lot against Kent State. Thought he was going to play against UCLA with Dom DeLuca.
Yeah.
I guess he was supposed to play against Illinois because DeLuca got hurt against.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. You're good.
Took me. I already said, Bob, I'm not a morning person, so I had to jolt them out.
We're going to help you with that. Don't worry about it. But I mean, I think your point though is valid. It's they really like their young linebackers, Max. Like you mentioned the true freshman Specca, some second year guys, Dakari who made the move right from safety. They see what the end result can be, but they're not there yet. So in the meantime, in a big game, who are they going to trust? It's probably going to be Tyler Elsdon. It's probably going to be Dom DeLuca. I personally think that Lincoln Riley would love it if Dom DeLuca and then Tyler Elsdon were in the game.
Yeah, Tony Rojas is an elite coverage linebacker. He has been fantastic in coverage this year. Made some just really spectacular plays. He has that one interception that's one of the best that I've seen live. I thought it was just fantastic. But Woody Marks is going to cause a matchup problem there because he's going to come out of the backfield. I think the stat is 50 consecutive games he has a catch in. Yeah. They're going to get him the ball out of the backfield, and the way Penn State defends it is going to be something to look at. I mean, just look at last week against UCLA. They gave up that 53-yarder to TJ Harden out of the backfield. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
All right, Max. I'll let you go first. All of our picks are online on PennLive. Johnny McGonigal has corralled all of our picks. Max's, mine, his. Joe Hermit, our photographer, is going to weigh in. I'm sure we all have some interesting thoughts. As we record this, I haven't because we went pretty early today. I haven't had a chance to see yet what you all of you guys have said. But let's get to it. Who do you like? Who's maybe a player on the spot? Don't be surprised if you can fill that in if you want. But what are your thoughts? I'm going to hold you to them. Penn State, USC, are they 6-0 going into their second bye week?
In the preseason, I predicted that Penn State would be 10-2, and that second loss came this week in LA. I have flipped my prediction since then. I've been impressed by what we've seen so far this year on both sides of the ball. I think the offense is more explosive, more consistent than it's done what it's needed to do so far. Yes, the defense has had a couple of hiccups against Bowling Green, opening drive touchdown against Illinois, but it has just buckled down in the second half time and again. So I've flipped my prediction. I think Penn State is the more talented team. I think they're more complete. But with that said, USC is a really good team too. So my number is 31-24. I think USC is going to take an early lead. Penn State's going to win it in the second half and have a comeback. And really, I think Penn State is going to be in control in the second half just because of their physicality. My players on the spot, the Penn State cornerbacks, because of the work that those USC receivers are able to do. I mean, there's 3 or 4 of them that are all worth watching. You think about Branch, Lane, Hudson, and Robinson as well. There's a lot of them there. And then my don't be surprised if, boy, I don't even remember what I wrote down at this point. I think it was, I did it yesterday. I think it was,
I understand. Hey,
I think it was about Penn State's running game because of the loss of Gentry at that linebacker spot. So I said, don't be surprised if Penn State really just mauls USC on the ground at some point. That's exactly what it was. And I'm sticking with it. So I like the Lions 31-24 with a little bit of a second half comeback.
Yeah. One possession. You see it as a one possession game, just like the betting line. I see it the same way. I have 2 things I've been pondering, for a while as I've watched this Penn State team is, one, as talented as they are, what happens on the road if they have to come from behind in the fourth quarter, which is kind of the flip of what you're saying. They might actually seize control of the game with their running game in the fourth quarter and their talent and the runners and that scheme take over. And that's absolutely a thing that could happen. But there's always some intangibles. Penn State's had some penalty issues. Penn State had turnovers, special teams, all of that factors into it. At some point, Penn State's going to have to, against a good team, they're going to have to win one in the fourth quarter, and the offense is going to have to do some heavy lifting. That was a storyline last year, Max, when the offense just wasn't good enough against Ohio State and also Michigan. This offense is not that offense. I know that, but at some point, that scenario is going to unfold, and I think you don't know what's going to happen until you see these guys put into that kind of pressure cooker. I do think there is a world in which that can happen. The other thing that I, have been more than a little concerned about, I mentioned the reserve linebackers, especially in tackling and in space. Whether Penn State wants to admit it or not, whether the fan base wants to admit it or not, the drop-off at defensive end, once you get past Abdul and deny Dennis Sutton, with where their depth is not where they thought it would be. And now these guys are going to be playing in warm weather, and I'm just curious how much they're going to be on the field, how Lincoln Riley's going to try and scheme to block those guys, especially Abdul, because they're going to move him around. That pass rush they don't have to get home on every time, but they have to put him on the ground. They have to rattle him. I think Zane Durant and also Jalen Reed can show up big in the pass rush, right? They've done it. They've done it multiple times. Jalen Reed knows how to blitz and get home. Zane Durant inside, if you're worried about Abdul and deny, Zane Durant inside is frolicking right now, Max. So when you think about their pass rush, it's not just those edge guys, but it's other positions, right, that are doing things. Sure. My wonder is, in this warm weather, what happens if the pass rush starts to wear down? For whatever reason, if they're on the field too long and they start to tire out. I think it's a one-possession game. Those are 2 big questions for me. I also had USC beating Penn State at the start in the preseason. I'm sticking with my pick, Max. I'm going to say USC wins in overtime.
Wow.
30-26. I think it'll be 23-all or something like that in regulation. But this USC has to have this game. I know it's trite to say that, and I think they're a little hacked off that they lost those last 2 games. Whatever USC has, whatever they have left in the tank, Penn State's going to see it. You mentioned the travel concerns. I think all of this adds up. I think it's going to be a whale of a game, but I think there's still some tests that Penn State has to pass, but they haven't seen them yet. I think they're going to see them on Saturday. So I like USC. It's a shaky pick, but I do think, like you said, this could really be a top 10 matchup and probably should have been a top 10 matchup, but USC just could not close the deal on the road, but they're at home on Saturday.
And I'm glad you went the other way. Gives us a little bit of parity in our choices here, and
Yep.
I think that I just think it's going to be a fun one. I think that all the concerns you mentioned are real. Penn State was tested a little bit in that Bowling Green game, but there was always a thought that well they're going to come back. It's going to be all right. And outside of that, it's been all Penn State to this point. So this could be a different game. It'll be interesting to see how they respond.
Yep. All right, Penn State fans, we're signing off. We gotta go plane hopping. We gotta get on the road. I hope everyone enjoys the game. If there's any Penn State fans out there that are listening or watching this Blue White Breakdown podcast, if you're going to the game, travel safe. Have a great time. It's a great trip to take. Don't have any travel issues. Max, Johnny, and myself will be out there along with Joe Hermit. Plenty of coverage. You'll hear from Johnny and I after the game. Next week's a bye week. We'll be talking about this game, Max, I feel like, for the next couple of days. Hopefully it lives up to the hype one way or the other. But, guys, we will be back all week to give you more updates on Penn State USC.